Good afternoon, YouTube, and welcome to Patriot Paths. My name is Lake Green. Welcome to today's episode. Before we get going, I first want to sincerely and heartily apologize that I have not made an episode in the last month or so. I've been so caught down with schoolwork and just with life in general that I have not really had a lot of time to make a video or to even really do any historical digging. You know, I really prefer to go out and check out historical sites with you guys, big and small, known and unknown. But due to the fact that I have not been able to do that, I did not make a video along with the other things going on, so I sincerely apologize. But not to worry, as the summer rolls around, I should be getting out some more content. We'll have to be going to some new areas. As I've said, we've checked out a lot around my immediate vicinity. But I'm going to be doing a lot of deep digging to try to bring you guys excellent content. I really pride myself on trying to bring stuff to the table that, you know, is really not talked about or not well discussed. But also I do a lot of mainstream things. Anything history, American history related, I'll be featuring. So not to worry. Bear with me. We're almost to the summer months and new content will be coming out. I promise. But for today's episode, we'll be getting into a founding father that is well known, and definitely heavily discussed, but nonetheless I wanted to discuss him today for today's topic, and that is none other than the great Benjamin Franklin. So everybody knows Ben Franklin. He's the man on the $100 bill. He's the man who, flew his kite and got lightning to come out of the sky and captured the lightning bolt. But he's more than that. He is in many ways the epitome of the American spirit. This country, we pride ourselves on one thing. I know it's been a hectic year. I don't get into politics much on this station, but it's been a hectic, crazy year, especially for our Constitution, our way of life. A whole lot of political debate going on in this country right now, and a tough, really tense time in the history of America. But that's why we have to really lean on history. If we can contextualize what's going on today through history, we'll be comforted to know that there have been very, very dark times and very tumultuous times throughout our country's history. And every time we get right through it. And I have no doubt that we will get through this tough year and the tough time that we are in as a country. Brighter days are ahead, I know it. But what I will say is Benjamin Franklin is really the epitome of economic freedom, the economic opportunity that America offers. Obviously there's people in Congress, not trying to get too political, but there are people in Congress today that are looking to take away economic freedom in this country, and that is terrible. But Benjamin Franklin really was one of the earliest examples of an individual that came to America before it was even America, and grew from nothing into a very wealthy person on the economic ladder. So one of the leading figures of early American history, Benjamin Franklin, was a statesman, author, publisher, scientist, inventor, and diplomat. Born on January 17, 1706, into a Boston family of really modest means, Franklin had little formal education. Remember, we saw his father and his mother's graves at the old Granary Burial Ground in Boston last summer. We took a trip there. We saw their graves. Be sure to check out that video. I'll have a link to it at the end of this video up there. But his father, Josiah Franklin, was a native of England. And his mother was Abiah Folger of Nantucket, Massachusetts. So he was an Englishman through and through, Puritan upbringing, and Franklin was the 8th of Abiah and Josiah's 10 offspring. Josiah Franklin was a native of England, as I said, but he was a candle and a soap maker. So really, just a modest individual from a modest family. I will say he had 17 children, and Franklin really had his work cut out for him. There was going to be no handouts for him. Franklin's formal education ended when he was 10, and however, he was an superb and avid reader, and educated himself, and he taught himself to how to be a good, adequate, and skilled writer, very proficient, and obviously because he became a printer. and a publisher. In 1718, at the age of 12, he was apprenticed to his older brother, James Franklin, a Boston printer, but by age 16 he had run away from Boston and ran to Philadelphia. He didn't change industries though. On his own at 16 years old in Philadelphia, he got right into the printing business there at the age of 17. And in late 1724, he traveled to London, England, and again found employment in the printing business. He returned to Philly in 1726 and within 2 years had opened a highly successful printing shop. He produced a broad expanse range of materials, and that included government pamphlets, publishings, books, and currency. Even money he was printing. Wow. And in 1729, he became the owner and publisher of a colonial newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette. Everybody knows, and of course he became famous for his infamous Poor Richard's Almanac, for his witty sayings that he published from 1733 to 1758. And of course, the expression that was famous there is early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. And he was deeply active from a young age in public affairs. In his adopted city, of course, he was not a native of Philly, as we stated. And he helped launch a lending library. And this was a time when books were really not in widespread circulation. Literacy was much lower than it is today. So he really contributed greatly to increasing the literacy and the availability of books. Remember, this is the Enlightenment era. And these founding principles at the time, knowledge, education, they were pillars of this era. And, Franklin, of course, heavily, exemplified and embodied those ideals. He took them to heart and really wanted to ensure that his fellow citizens were educated. And as his business prospered, he really became very active in public affairs. And by the 1730s, he'd established a whole lot of community organizations, including the Lending Library, as I stated. And it was actually the largest U.S. Public library until the 1850s. And, of course, the Carnegie libraries that came after due to Andrew Carnegie, made Franklin dwarf that counterpart. But nonetheless, still very important. He helped to found the city's first fire company, a police patrol, and the American Philosophical Society. And that's a group devoted to this day to the sciences and other scholarly pursuits. And of course, he organized the Pennsylvania militia, built a city hospital, and was a major player in the program to get lighting in Philadelphia's streets. And he was instrumental in the creation of the Academy of Philadelphia, a college which opened in 1751 and eventually became the University of Pennsylvania. And he was, of course, the prolific inventor that we all know. The lightning rod he invented, which really was a major innovation at this time, as houses were getting struck by lightning and fires were burning homes down. Lightning rod really mitigated that. And he invented the bifocals, of course, and in 1752 he conducted his famous kite experiment and demonstrated that lightning is actually electricity. And of course, he was the founder of a whole lot of electrical terms, including the terms battery, charge, and conductor, all by Benjamin Franklin. And in the early 1760s, he invented a musical instrument called the glass harmonica. And Beethoven and Mozart themselves wrote music for this instrument, but by the early 19th century, it had been pretty much out of use and became obsolete. During the American Revolution, he served in the Second Continental Congress and helped draft the Declaration of Independence in 1776. But before we get into any further details that everybody knows, I want to raise a detail that not many people know. Franklin was instrumental in fomenting public dissent towards the British, especially in the colonies of Massachusetts and New England. The royal governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony at the time was a man by the name of Thomas Hutchinson, and he had been secretly writing to the king and the Parliament of England during those tumultuous 1760 years and the early 1770s, pretty much stating that, he was fearful for his life, and that the only way to subdue the rebels, as the, protesting colonists were known by the British at the time, was to send in a large force of military soldiers and, to be crushed by force, to crush them by force. And Franklin discovered the letters, and he forwarded them right back to the colonies. And when they were published, he did it intentionally, knowing what would happen. Those letters were published, and the major effect they had on fomenting public sentiment and increasing anger in Massachusetts played a pivotal role in the startings of the American Revolution. And that's so funny because Benjamin Franklin was a man who was beloved by England, and a man who was beloved by not only England but his colonists. And after that, the English lost all respect for him, and he left England in disgrace in 1775. And it was a long time. He wasn't a supporter of independence at first. It took him a very long time to come to accepting that the American colonies should be their own country. And by 1775, he had fully switched over to the side of independence. During the war, he was a major figure. He negotiated, of course, the 1780 Treaty of Paris that ended the Revolutionary War, and he was a major player in cementing the U.S.-French alliance while he was a major ambassador to France, and he was the only founding father to have signed all 4 of the key documents establishing the country, which is the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Alliance with France, the Treaty of Paris, and the U.S. Constitution. That was his final act of public service in 1787. He was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention. He died at the age of 84 on April 17, 1790 in Philadelphia, and followed by a funeral that was attended by an estimated 20,000 people. He was buried in Philadelphia's Christ Church Cemetery. And in his will, he left money to Boston and Philly, his native city and his adoptive city. And both were later used to establish a trade school, the Franklin Institute, the Franklin Science Museum, and to fund scholarships and other community projects. He was truly a community man and a public servant till the day he died. And more than 200 years after his death, he remains one of the most celebrated figures in U.S. history. His illegitimate son aside, and his many disputed affairs in France and England, for all his personal faults, there was no doubt that he was as intelligent a man, a true Renaissance man, a true Enlightenment figure, an inventor, a statesman, an innovator, a public servant, and an intellectual, and a true American, an embodier and an emblem of the American sentiment of enterprise, innovation, individual freedom, and economic opportunity. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you soon on Patriot Paths, and be sure to always remember your history. Without history, you don't know where you're going, you don't know who you are, and you don't know where you've been. Thank you. God bless America, and we'll see you next time on Patriot Paths.